The Senate Judiciary Committee will be holding a hearing tomorrow involving both Dr. Blasey Ford and Brett Kavanaugh. And of course, this hearing is to hear their testimony regarding sexual assault allegations, attempted rape allegations. Now, at the moment, it's unclear whether or not the second accuser, Debbie Ramirez, or the third accuser will be involved in this hearing. But what we do know, or at least what we've had some hints about, are the various pieces of evidence that they plan to bring to the table for this hearing. So first, there's Brett Kavanaugh's 1982 calendar. That's right, he kept his 1982 calendar, which is kind of amazing. When I first read the headline about this, I'm just gonna be honest, I thought there's no way that this calendar is authentic. Who keeps their calendar from 1982? But it does look authentic, to be fair. And when you look through it, it appears to just have mundane stuff. And the whole point of him bringing his calendar up is to make a point about how, there's no party in question here that describes or goes along with what Dr. Blasey Ford described, right? But
no, this is nonsense.
This is nonsense.
Okay, so look, you take any piece of data you like and make, and they're all data points, and we're all trying to figure this thing out. And there are some data points on Dr. Blasey's side or Ramirez's side where I go, that's not that persuasive either, right? But the calendar has the parties that were planned out ahead of time. Oh, we're going to go to the beach for this such and such person's party, right? It doesn't have every single party in the middle of the summer that people threw impromptu, and oftentimes when the parents weren't present because they were going to drink illegally. Okay, the seniors might have been legal, but everybody else would have been drinking illegally at the time. That's not the one you write down in your calendar that your parents can see. You write, hey, I'm going to Nikki's birthday party. You don't write, I'm going to John's party that you guys don't know about, where we're at a bare minimum going to drink very, very heavily.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So I agree that piece of evidence is pretty weak. It's very likely that he wouldn't have put the date of that party down on the calendar. Now, when it comes to Dr. Ford Blasey, some fascinating stuff has come up. So according to reporting, 4 people submitted these sworn affidavits to the Senate Judiciary Committee saying that Christine Blasey Ford previously told them about the incident. So Russell Ford is one of those individuals, and he is Blasey Ford's husband. And he writes, she said that in high school she had been trapped in a room and physically restrained by one boy who was molesting her while another boy watched. She said she was eventually able to escape before she was raped, but that the experience was very traumatic because she felt like she had no control and was physically dominated. Now, there was another person involved in signing a sworn affidavit, and that's Keith Kogler. That's a close friend of Ford and her husband, and he submitted a sworn affidavit saying he first learned of the alleged sexual assault in the summer of 2016. So he writes, while discussing the case of Brock Turner, Kogler said Ford told him she was assaulted in high school by a man who was now a federal judge in Washington, D.C., meaning Brett Kavanaugh. On June 29th, Kogler said Ford sent him an email saying the person who assaulted her in high school was the president's, quote, favorite for SCOTUS. And then he writes back to her, by the way, this is all via email, which is important, okay? So he writes back to her and says, I remember you telling me about him, but don't remember his name. Do you mind telling me so I can read about him? And she writes back, Brett Kavanaugh. There's another person, Rebecca White, a friend of Ford's who is also her neighbor. And she said that Ford first told her about the alleged assault in 2017 after she read a social media post White wrote detailing her own experience with sexual assault. The timing's interesting there because remember, 2017, I think that's when the Me Too movement began. People started talking about their experiences, if I'm not mistaken. So that's probably why there was a social media post. And then here's what Rebecca White wrote. I was walking my dog and Christine was outside of her house. I stopped to speak with her. She then told me that when she was a young teen, she had been sexually assaulted by an older teen. I remember her saying that her assailant was now a federal judge. And then there's one other person, but do you want to jump in before I get to the fourth?
Yeah, so these are varying degrees of credibility. The one, I want no reason to disbelieve any of them or Ford in this situation. It doesn't mean that Kavanaugh doesn't have a different recollection, et cetera. But when she writes after he is being considered for the Supreme Court, not after he was picked, but while he was being considered, if you're a Republican, you might say, Well, at that point, she knows he might go on the Supreme Court, and that's why she might be talking about Kavanaugh. But remember, these go further back. So the ones that are in 2012, 2013, even 2016, et cetera, where she has no idea that he's going to be nominated for the Supreme Court and talks about this person who had done this to her has more and more credibility. And then I would ask you, if you're skeptical, why do you think she was doing that about at that point, a random judge that she had no reason to believe would be nominated to the Supreme Court? That she just decided to pick a name out of a hat and go, that federal judge that I used to know, I'm going to start making things up about him in the year 2012. That would seem awfully strange.
Well, the fourth person talks about being informed about Dr. Ford's sexual assault in 2013. So let me give you the details on that. Another longtime friend of Ford's, Adela Gildo-Mazan, submitted an affidavit saying that Ford told her about the alleged assault in June of 2013 at a restaurant in Mountain View, California. In fact, she says she has a receipt from the restaurant for that day. So
listen, again, that's a detail that I don't find to be relevant, that she has a receipt from the restaurant. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. Okay, so they went to a restaurant.
It's at least corroborating evidence that they communicated that day. It doesn't necessarily prove what they were discussing, but it
doesn't even prove that it was her at the restaurant. So anyway,
if she used her credit card to pay, it could be proof.
No, it proves that the person signing the affidavit was at the restaurant. In the receipt, it doesn't say you had lunch with this other person and I will name her.
Okay, but when you're paying with your credit card for the meal, it says your name. It says the name of the person's credit card. The name that's on the credit card.
All right, it's totally irrelevant.
Yeah.
Okay, totally irrelevant. Focus on what is important, okay? So, look, we've now seen enough evidence that I think Kavanaugh has only one out, and Dr. Blasey vigorously disputes it. But she's not making this stuff up. She didn't make it up in 2013. She didn't make it up in 2012. You don't pick a random person out of thin air and start telling people and your therapist and your husband and your friends about this traumatic incident, and it's this guy. What, just in case? Are there people all across the country now making up things about somebody who might get appointed in the year 2023? No, that's preposterous, right? So she clearly believes that this happened. She is genuine. It's not a political hatchet job. I'm not talking about the other two, and they have different fact patterns. We're just talking about Christine Blasey Ford, okay? And so the only out that Kavanaugh really has is mistaken identity. I'm sure that that happened. She believes that happened to her, but it wasn't me. But saying it didn't happen or she's making it up, it just doesn't match the facts. It just doesn't. Thanks for watching this.